Yo! Showing you a bit of an insight into the 3D modelling of the X-frame table. I did a video, I videoed the whole lot, but it was like 4 hours long and messy, and I talked a load of nonsense and showed you loads of things that probably nobody's interested in really, apart from people who use Inventor, which is a 3D modelling software. So, as you can see on the screen, I've got the X-frame table here. See if I can minimise that a bit, not that it matters. So this is the whole assembly. We have the X-frame itself assembly, and then the wooden top and the 2 panes of glass, and then broken down X-frame assembly in steel tabletop in its constituent parts: glass panel, top tube, of which there's 2, middle tube 1, and this X-frame here. So we started with, if I show you this in the full screen, we started with this. It's now green. There you go. You can see it better now. So I modelled this first, and if I show you the sketch, in fact, I don't want to make that small. It's annoying. If I show you the sketch of this, this is the sketch that I did, which represents this. It's to within a mil. There's not a lot in it. This I've had for 8 years sitting in the shed from when I made the Mark 1 version that sits in my dining room. This is the Mark 2, and I'll explain the difference, the reasons for that, the reasons and differences. So the reason I made a Mark 2 is because I made it boltable. The first one I made the X-frame assembly, hold on, this in one piece. So each of these 3 tubes were welded into this X-frame. They weren't bolted like they are here. So it was big, heavy, not easy to install, you know, not easy to get through the door in the house. And it was a lump. So I thought, it's not great, I need a Mark II. So I drew up the Mark II on a 2D software that I used to use, and had it cut out, and then it just sat, the pair of legs just sat in the shed forever. And I've only just got round now to thinking, I need to make that, and I want to sort of, you know, get it out there and show people, with how big old social is at the moment. So I made the X-frame, so I modelled the X, and then I modelled the flat steel, flat bar that surrounds it, turns it into like a big girder, an X girder. And then I built the tubes, so it's just a piece of steel tube with a cap on each end, and with the connecting plate, which I have them here. They still haven't been cleaned up all that time that they've been made. You probably can't see that, but it's still got dross, they call it, from the cutting process. You don't get that as much now. Things have got better in 8 years. So I modelled these as I already have them. I would have modelled them anyway, but I modelled those ones because I have them, so they ended up that shape because that's the shape I chose 8 years ago. So I did that one, and I did the top tube, as I'm calling it, which is just half of this, if you like. That's like 2 of them perpendicular stuck together plates, and that's just on its own. Glass panel, pretty boring, obviously. Get that made, and then I've got dubbed corners, so dubbed and polished edges and corners, so it's nice and clean and tidy. And then the timber top. So the timber top is oak. Well, it's going to be oak. I've not actually made it yet. And I am half lapping the joints, it's called. So I am cut a mouth out of each one and then lap them together, drill a hole through them and put a countersunk bolt in, which I have recessed into the bottom of the table with some crazy mottled black grey washer. I don't know why it's that colour. The reason for 2 glass panels, the one I've got in my dining room, the Mark 1, is 1 glass panel. It's slightly smaller than this table by probably 400mm in length, but that's it actually. The width is the same, 1200mm, so it measures, let's get the measuring tool out. So this table measures, the Mark 2 measures 2.5 meters long by 1200mm wide, and it's made out of, like I said, oak beam, hand planed oak beam, and then I will cut the half laps, rebate it for the glass to sit in, and like I said, or like I was going to say, got sidetracked again. 2 pieces of glass, because they're not as heavy, they're easier to manage. The one I've got is a big piece of glass, and it's a, you know, it's a bit scary when you're wandering it through the house, round corners and stuff. It's a bit of a lump, so I think it's better in 2, and I don't think it looks bad. So obviously this is what you end up with, the assembly complete, bolts together. So each leg, each X-frame leg, if you like, is separate, and the 3 tubes are separate, and it can all be assembled like a piece of IKEA furniture in wherever it's going, and then all together it's here. The tabletop bolts to the X-frame with it in 4 places, 1 on the top of each leg of the X-frames. They are, again, everything's got countersunk bolts in it, and I think it looks quite good with the countersunk bolts in it. I quite like that. It's industrial. The Mark 1 version's got metal straps around the edges. I don't think this needs it, but I don't know. I might add a piece on and see what that looks like. I might add the straps on, but I don't know. The first one I made is just screwed together through the ends, and then it's got these metal straps with coach bolts through it. This one's a lot cleaner looking than the Mark 1. Mark 1 is a bit more rural, a bit more agricultural probably. Just, you know, I didn't take massive care in putting it together, and I will now with this one. I'll take more care getting the lap joints tidy. I'm more of a steel worker than I am a carpenter, joiner, furniture maker. Well, I am a furniture maker, I suppose, just an industrial one. And then, so this is the table. It's going to have 2 sculptures under it, aluminium flower sculptures. They're going to grow out of the legs somewhere, I think. I'm going to try and model them and put them on the drawing. It's not very easy. It's not easy to make sort of free-form shapes like that on Inventor, so it will be a much more simple model of the flower heads, and I'll probably only model 1 and just place them both. They will both be unique in real life, and they will sit in between, underneath each section, each of these sections here, and I think that will hopefully give it a bit more of a unique edge to the piece. At the moment I usually lacquer furniture so that it retains that sort of raw finish, that raw look about it, which I quite like. But equally, it could be powder coated in different shades of black or grey, or I don't know, dark green. I'm not sure. I might open that up to people's opinions and see what's best. But because it's inside, generally, just lacquering. I can lacquer, powder coat lacquer actually. Powder coat, clear coat, powder coat, clear. Yeah, I can powder coat it clear or coloured. So I could do that as well. Yeah, there it is. That's the table. Okay, we have the flower sculptures. So a few minutes ago in the video, which was actually a week or two ago, I said that I'd probably put two sculptures under the table, one under this section and one under this section here, but I decided to put more flowers under it, so I've gone with a lily looking style flower, and I've ended up with a few. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh look, there you go, 6 of them, 6 flower heads. I thought it looked better, so that's what I've gone with. Now they are just a representation on this program on Inventor, because they're not, the petals aren't easy to make. They won't look like that. The shape is right because there's 3 different shapes. There's the internal petal shape and the external petal shape, and they are both marginally different, as you can see. I've actually only opened that one, which is the internal. The external is more rounded, the internal is sharper, if you like. More of a leaf shape, I suppose. There are lots of different shapes of leaves. Don't worry about that. And the way I had to do it was in segments. I sketched the outline of a petal, and then I drew lines through it, and I extruded every single each piece, and then constrained them together and set them at an angle. For those that might know a little bit about Inventor, I'm pretty certain you could freeform it, but it takes ages, and I just don't. I need a representation. I don't need it to be super accurate for what it is, because yeah, I know in my head what I'm making. It'll be done on the English wheel. I've got a little English wheel over there, and it'll be done by bending, forming, hammering, wheeling until I get the desired shape. There's quite a few to do, but I think it looks pretty cool. Now there's no stems on these flower heads at the moment. We've got the pistil, and we've got the stamens. I'll have to look that up. I think it's the stamens, and the pistil is the center. So we'll have those in it, and then let's just go on this as a full screen now. And then they'll be positioned something like this. Obviously there's a few interactions there. What do they call it? They call it something. What's the word? Yes, tolerance. They call it something, and it's gone out of my mind what it is. The clash will do. It clashes here, and it clashes probably in another few places. Obviously it won't do that. These are all identical flower heads. Each one will be slightly different, and the petals could be manipulated as such so that they fit together as a group of flowers, or a bunch of flowers. And then I'll create the stems, and I think I'll do something like wrap them round the bottom tube in a way that you can still thread the bottom tube through them to install it. That makes it a bit more difficult, but you know, it's a detail really. And then somehow terminate them, the stems, probably inside a frame leg or something like that. I'm not entirely sure yet. These things usually develop as I put one flower head in and sort of start stringing them into the table, into position. I'll get a better idea of how to go about forming the stems and how they'll flow and fit in the leg. I can't really do that on modeling software. It doesn't. I'll be playing about forever, and there's no need. I can do that in the real, as it were. That's it for the lilies. I need to stop erming. So I'm going to make a video, well, I've already started it, on the fabrication of the steel frame. So I'm going to make a video fabricating this. I've made one frame already. In fact, you can actually see it in the background there. There it is. I'm going to make the other one, and then I've got to make the tube assemblies with the cleats or the brackets on them. So I'll do that and get that video out soonish, and then I will order the aluminum man. I'll order the aluminium to create the petals, and then obviously to weld it together to create the lily head, the lily flower. All of this down here looks a bit rough, but it will all be blended together and molded and then welded and finished so that it flows into the stem. I'm sure there's a name for this section of the flower, like the bulby bit before it goes into the stem. All of that will kind of flow together. And then the stem, which I've not modelled on this, but like I said, I don't need to. It's a waste of time. It's only for representation really. I've kind of got the idea of how it's going. So once I've done the fabrication of the steel, fabrication of the tubes, I'll order the stuff for the flower heads. I need to create the wooden top, and then once I've got the steel frame and the wooden top bolted together, I can position all of the flowers in the right place, make the stems, get that all set so it all sits nicely and is secure. There was a bit of a design, there was a bit of a consideration for how the lily heads sit. You can see those stick out a little bit from the frame. So in reality, they need to move slightly. These are all unconstrained at the minute, so I can move them about. What I'm thinking is, when you're tucked in with your chair, you don't want to be smashing your knee on the corner of a petal, hurting your knee and bending the petal. So that was another reason for having multiple smaller flower heads instead of two bigger ones, because I think it would be more difficult to make the petals sort of contain them in that area. Maybe not. I might have been able to manipulate, and I might make a bigger version and see what it looks like. But so far, that's where we're at. As you can see it from the bottom, so it's all kind of contained within this triangle of tubes, the top section of the X, so that you shouldn't bang your knee on it. It shouldn't get in the way of you sitting at the table comfortably, because that's not a very good table if it's uncomfortable to sit at. So I'll make sure of that. I don't think my flowers stick out the top of the glass. The glass, once everything's in place, that's the last thing to be dropped in. So everything will be built, X-frame, tabletop, flowers, and then drop the 2 panes of glass in, and that finishes the table off. So that'll be like the last video really, or as part of assembly maybe. That's it. That's where we're up to at the minute, or I'm up to at the minute. Like I said, I will continue with the X-frame and get that video sorted. Need to get the right bolts. These are structural bolts actually. It doesn't really matter, but the structural galv bolts look quite nice. So I will get some ordered for that. Done. On to the next bit.